A lot of people have criticized Matt Walsh for his increasingly extreme rhetoric as of late, and the scary thing is that as I was going over some of his stuff, I found myself agreeing with him a lot more than I would have expected. For example, in regards to certain quote-unquote performances in which children have been in attendance in certain cities in America, Matt Walsh had this to say.
I want law enforcement agents running up onto that stage, tackling that piece of garbage, that scum, dragging him off the stage by his feet while he's in handcuffs. That's what I want.
To me, that's a perfectly reasonable and expected reaction to the kind of degeneracy that I can't even show on YouTube without blurring it. But I want to show you in this video why I think that Matt Walsh is not only mediocre and incompetent in a lot of important ways, but also seriously in need of listening to someone like Jordan Peterson a bit more carefully. Especially when you consider the fact that they probably attend the same Wednesday morning Zoom meetings with their boss Benjamin Shapiro. An obvious example of this incompetence on the part of Matt Walsh was his recent commentary on Jeffree Star, who is a popular online influencer with millions of followers, many of whom are impressionable young kids, who Matt Walsh rightly worries about because impressionable young kids are exactly the demographic that the small minority of extreme left-wing ideologues are actively trying to manipulate and indoctrinate. Jeffree Star went viral for saying this.
I'm not into all the other bullshit. I think.
What other bull?
The they and them.
Yeah.
And all that extra shit that we added during the pandemic because everyone was so bored on their houses. They just started to make up more and more shit.
More stuff.
Yeah. That's where the conservatives like me because I'm just real.
Yeah, you do have a conservative vibe to you.
Them. You're trans, you're male, or you're female.
And you're standing on that.
Get so mad when I say that. How are you a they? What the f does that mean? It's stupid is what it is.
Yeah.
But you need someone like me that looks like me to say it. Because if you say it, it turns into you're homophobic. You hate trans people. You hate gays. And it's just how you feel. You don't hate anyone. You just think it's stupid.
Now, if I had kids and I was worried about the influence of gender ideology in their lives, I would be pretty happy that someone who they and millions of other kids look up to comes out and very clearly, and I would say effectively, condemns, mocks, and rejects all of the worst elements of gender ideology. Like the idea that male and female are socially constructed categories and people can identify as something other than male or female. But because Matt Walsh has to toe the farthest possible line in order to maintain his conservative credentials, this is what he had to say about this clip.
Jeffree Star's conservative defenders have told me that, well, we should accept him into the fold because he is, they say, mostly right about the gender issue. But he's not mostly right. He's not even in the neighborhood of right. He believes that a person can identify as and actually be a member of the opposite sex. He affirms transgenderism. Celebrating Jeffree Star at this point, it's like if somebody was beating you over the head with a baseball bat, and then Jeffree Star ran in and said, no, don't beat him over the head with a baseball bat. Just stomp on his face with your boot instead. No, he's still your enemy. He's still trying to kill you, just perhaps in a slightly less efficient manner.
So even though Jeffree Star basically committed utter blasphemy in the eyes of the gender ideologues, Matt Walsh considers him your enemy that is beating you with a boot. It's ridiculous. But here is the most laughable part of this entire rant.
No, we don't need people like him to make the argument. We don't need a cross-dressing trans activist with neck tattoos and copious amounts of makeup to make the argument. You know who we need? This goes back to the beginning of the show. We need normal people. Normal people like you. Normal, common sense people who live normal lives and dress and act like normal people. We need them to speak up and be advocates.
This is such a toothless injunction that Walsh puts forward. We don't need people who dress in ways that I don't find appealing. We need normal people who dress normally to make our point. Well, maybe if Matt Walsh took some time to actually hang out with his coworkers on their coffee break, he might learn why dismissing someone because of how they dress is a little dim-witted.
And so there have been people who play at the edges of gender identity forever. And fair enough. And sometimes that's even admirable if it's done in a sophisticated way. And it's charismatic. So you see it in Mick Jagger, you see it in David Bowie, you see it, and you see it in people like Madonna as well, because Madonna had a hard edge, that was very masculine. And all the Marvel superhero women have a hard masculine edge. And so we find that charismatic because those people are also integrated.
And I don't understand how Matt Walsh can claim the mantle of normalcy when he himself holds a very not normal position when it comes to something like gay marriage, especially given how little he appears to just clearly own up to his position when he's having a conversation with someone who actually does represent the quote-unquote normal perspective.
Do you think people, if they feel like is this a religious thing? Like, do you think that people who are gay should practice homosexuality? Or do you think that they should try to avoid it because biblically it's frowned upon?
I am a Christian. I'm Catholic. So if you want to talk about the biblical aspects of it, I can do that.
But what are your own personal feelings about like gay people? Should they avoid being gay?
You know, I believe in sexual morality. Is that the sexual act, properly ordered, belongs within the marital bond, which also means that it's like sexually immoral to have sex before marriage. All these things happen. I'm aware of that, but I do believe that it's immoral.
I am glad that there are people like Matt who are willing to stick to their positions, even if I disagree with them. But don't sit there and claim the mantle of normalcy when it's the people who disagree with you who are putting forward the most reasonable point of view.
There's people that are just gay. They know they're gay. They've been gay forever. I have friends that are gay, and it's not something that was forced upon them. It's not something that was asked of them or something they were manipulated into being. They're just gay. And if those gay people find other gay people and they fall in love and they decide to get married, I don't see how that affects anyone other than someone that's not gay who has this idea that they shouldn't be that way. But they're just gay. You're not going to fix that.
You know, if someone's saying, well, I'll cure you of your homosexuality, it's like, well, it's not a disease, first of all, and so it doesn't need a cure, and probably you can't do that anyways. And I would say it's got to be the case that the hope of the more enlightened conservative types who were willing to open the door to gay marriage was that by bringing those relationships inside the traditional fold, that things would normalize, right? Yeah. And that there would be a promotion of something like stable, mature, responsible, long-term monogamy.
Now let me step back for a second, because the point of this video is not to just attack Matt Walsh, because like I said, for better or worse, he says things that people resonate with. But there is something scary going on, because there appears to be a psychological pattern that is reemerging at this moment. When Matt Walsh lambasts legitimately degenerate behavior, he does so in a way that's partly true, but missing a key insight that someone like Jordan Peterson is actually clued in on.
What you need to understand here is that we are dealing with pure evil. This is pure evil. The people who are doing this are evil. The people that are attending it, and the people who support it. And I know people you don't want to think this way about your fellow Americans, especially if you go online and you see the number of just seemingly normal Americans who will defend this, and you think, I can't believe that there are so many evil people in this country. There are. And they are evil people.
See, the problem as far as I'm concerned with it is it's not thought through very well. And you can't divide the world neatly into perpetrators and victims. And you certainly can't divide the world neatly into perpetrators and victims and then assume that you're only in the victim class and then assume that that gives you certain, like access to certain forms of redress, let's say. It gets dangerous very rapidly if you do that sort of thing.
And they're not sorry, and they're not ashamed, and they're not ever going to stop until they're made to stop.
And here's the thing. If you believe that the stuff that Matt Walsh is criticizing is disgusting, which I believe it is, and I think most people do, then you should be frightened, because we know something about disgust and how disgust works in human beings and what happens in societies when people begin to act on that disgust.
And so that's the disgust thing. That's unbelievably important. People are often accused, if they're conservative, of being fearful, and that's why they, suppress other people's viewpoints. But that doesn't look right. It's low openness and high orderliness, and that looks like it's associated with disgust, and that looks like it's associated with something called the extended immune system, which is the proclivity of people to keep themselves away from potential sources of contamination. And that was a manifestation of disgust, not of fear. It's a whole different thing.
Drag phobia, they say. First of all, it's not phobia. It's drag disgust, drag nausea, one of those words. It's not a phobia. You don't scare me. I'm scared on behalf of the kids. I'm scared for the kids that are being exposed to this stuff and the effect it's going to have on them. But no one's afraid of you.
And the thing about something that's disgusting is you don't isolate it exactly. You destroy it, right? It's the thing you do with rats and insects, for example, is destroy them.
So with this is not compromise, okay? All we can do with this is crush it, destroy it. That's what you do with evil. And that's what we have to do with this.
One of the things that Maya and I found when we were writing this paper, we were looking at the discourse that precedes genocide in genocidal states, and the enhancement of a sense of victimization on the part of one of the groups, usually the group that's going to commit the genocide. First of all, their sense of being victims is much heightened by the demagogues who are trying to stir up this sort of hatred.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
It's really terrifying because one of the things people often said about Germany was that, you know, it was a very civilized country and yet it descended into barbarity. But conscientiousness is a very good predictor of long-term success. And so you could say, well, conscientious societies are more civilized, but they're also more orderly. And that makes them more disgust sensitive. And so what it might have easily been in Germany was that it was an excess of civilization rather than its lack that produced exactly these consequences. And that's a far more frightening proposition, and one that's, I believe, much more likely to be true.
And if you're thinking to yourself, Paul, isn't it a little heavy-handed to compare Matt Walsh's rhetoric to that of a genocidal regime? Consider this. The disgust that the German people felt and then acted on was the result of lies and propaganda, but the stuff that disgusts you and I is actually happening. And if there is one thing that Jordan Peterson should be quick to remind us of, it's that the capacity to overreact to things that disgust us is something that lurks within us always.
You know, and he does a very good job of documenting how an ordinary person transforms into a Nazi murderer. And I had to read that. I said, but don't you compartmentalize it. This is about you, right? This isn't about someone else. When you read history, you think, well, that's about someone else. It's like, unless maybe you're a victim and you identify with the victims. It's a very rare person who reads history and identifies with the perpetrators. But unless you read history and identify with the perpetrators, then you don't understand history at all. And so who wants to understand that? And I get my students, I said, look, I've told them this for 30 years. Here's something you have to understand. If you were in Nazi Germany, the statistical probability is overwhelming that you would have been a perpetrator. Right? You think you would have rescued Anne Frank. It's like, think again. Those people are very, 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 very rare. They put their lives on the line to do that. They put their families' lives on the line to do that. You think you're one of those people? Really? It's like that. All that means is that you know nothing. You know nothing about yourself. You know nothing about people. You know nothing about politics or economics or history.
So it looks to me like we have two options. We can either call out the legitimately disgusting things that are going on in our society, and we can hold those individual perpetrators accountable, or we can sit back and let the far left and far right continue to escalate things until things go so far off the rails as they have so many times in history, over and over again. I prefer the former, which is why I spend so much of my goddamn free time making these videos and trying to say what I believe to be true as best as I can, because I'm legitimately worried what happens if I don't. And so with that, good luck and Godspeed.